This is Chapter 8, Part 2, The Power of Social Media. Influences come to us from all directions. We're influenced by the perspectives of our family and friends, our teachers and professors, and those are, original ways of being influenced. And even old-fashioned media like newspapers, radios, and TV. But now we have social media, which is ubiquitous, meaning everywhere, all the time. And via our phones, which are always in our pockets, we have the capacity to be influenced at almost any time of the night or day. So we're going to take a little time and examine this. So again, social media is everywhere. You'll notice sometimes it seems like foghorns shouting at us, like we're getting so many dings and commands and ads. It's almost like it's hard to tune it out. We can have a huge social influence. Every single action and thought, many people publish on social media, getting instant responses from friends and people they barely know, and making, especially people who are vulnerable, really subject to those responses. And we make our choices on how much social media to engage in, but we tend to choose it. I was struck both in Chicago recently and in Korea over the summer at how many times I would be on a train like this with a whole bunch of people together, but nobody together, because every single person was elsewhere. They were on their phone and they were not present in that moment. How is this changing our brains and our world? How are we influenced? So we know that teens are vulnerable to social media in particular. You can see this quote from Kara: "The first thing I do in the morning is reach for my phone. I'm always on it during school. It's the first thing I look at when I get home." And I imagine this is true for others of us as well, but teens are particularly vulnerable to the influence of social media because they are in that life stage of forming their social identity, their professional identity, their adult identity. And in order to do so, they have to have feedback from others. And this makes them susceptible to influence. And we know that many teens, looking at the black box in the corner, many teens and probably many adults check phones at night when they should be sleeping. And if you think about the already omnipresent concern that teens have about the opinions of others, and then you allow this to be 24/7, even at night as time of rest, you can see that why ills like depression and anxiety are heightened, especially for girls. And there are many risks for girls regarding the social feedback that happens all the time like this. Addicted to social media with a question mark, you can see that some people do seem to respond in a way that's similar to addiction. Quoting this professor of addictive medicine, she says, "We have a basic biological imperative to connect with other people. That directly affects the release of dopamine in the reward pathway. Millions of years of evolution are behind that system to get us to come together and live in communities, to find mates, to propagate our species." So there's no doubt that a vehicle like social media, which optimizes this connection between people, is going to have the potential for addiction. And you'll notice that she gives this quote in a movie called The Social Dilemma, which I have downloaded and put a link to because it's now been made free. It's no longer being charged for. And I think it's an important film for everyone to watch, related to this power of persuasion and influence. Now, although the APA does not yet qualify social media addiction as a formal disorder diagnosable, psychologists nevertheless contend with it in real life, characterizing it by over-concern about social media, so it influences you, having an uncontrollable urge to log on, and maybe a little anxiety if your phone isn't with you. And the dedication of so much time to social media that it impairs other life areas. People talk about, oh, they're just going to glance at their phone for a minute, and before they know it, 20 minutes has gone by. So it really is becoming a thief. And then we see also characteristics that are typical of any addiction, which is mood modification. That is, you're happy when you have it or unhappy when you don't. Salience, meaning that the phone, let's say, becomes very, very important, a heightened attention to it, and maybe an effort to seek it or look for it if you don't have it, and maybe an inability to rest until you find it. Tolerance. So you get a reward initially you get a reward from some small thing on your phone, and later it takes more of that in order to experience the same reward. Withdrawal. If we don't have our phones, there are those irritable symptoms when we say take a few days off, a digital break. Conflict, meaning that it causes sometimes tension and conflict with other people or with your workplace. And relapse. If you go and you take a break from your media, you tend to fall back into the same habits when you get your media back again. So yeah, who knows whether in the future this will be a diagnosable condition. Influenced by social media? Well, we know that the mental shortcuts we tend to take, our heuristics, don't help us respond to social media influences. So we know that we use shortcuts to help navigate and keep us safe, and this means we attend to more fearful, dangerous stimuli. We remember hurtful things more strongly, and we join with others' opinions, like we want to merge our opinions, and that basis for that would be we need communities as humans. But those tendencies make us vulnerable to cognitive bias, and that is to selecting for those kinds of influences. So social media manipulates these tendencies. First off, it creates urgency, like those notifications, red dots, beeps, buzzes, oh my goodness, all those things demanding, like, oh, emergency, look at me, look at me. Social media encourages reward seeking, meaning, well, first off, we seek rewards through social feedback, but we also have like endless scrolls. We watch a cute little video, and then conveniently YouTube pushes us to the next video through autoplay, or provides us with dozens of hyperlinks so we can find out more about that, or just scrolling on and on and on. So this really does activate our reward system and make us keep seeking more and more rewards like that. And social media engages negative content. Because of what we just discussed on the previous slide, we have a bias toward negative content. And since we focus on what's negative, it tunes us to bad things, and this can bring a negative outlook. Social media creates comparisons. We each try to portray ourselves at our best. When we post up on social media, we tend not to put our worst selves, but instead put our best selves. But because everyone is presenting themselves in that way, we end up comparing the self we know, which is maybe not that great all the time, with the very best presentation of other people, and it can make negative comparisons inevitable, especially for teens who are forming their identities. And finally, social media can isolate us. Perhaps you have been ghosted. This is a new term to me, but that is someone, you are trying to get in touch with someone via all these social media platforms, and that person does not respond to you. And that's ostracism. And it can be hard enough in the real world. When this happens on your phone when you're alone or doing something else, this is even harder. So I put this book here. It's a book that I haven't yet read, but I want to read it. And it relates somewhat to that video that I'll show you at the end, but quoting the description of the book, we all have a vague sense that social media is bad for our children, for our minds, for our democracies. but the truth is that its reach and impact run far deeper than we have understood. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and other social networks preyed on psychological frailties to create algorithms that drive everyday users to extreme opinions and increasingly extreme actions, leading to a destabilized world for everyone. Algorithms are just formulas, so they have devised formulas that are most likely to persuade you. Traversing the planet, Fisher tracks the ubiquity of hate speech and its spillover into violence, ills that first festered in far-off locales to their dark culmination in America during the pandemic, the 2020 election, and the Capitol insurrection. Social media giants refuse to intervene in any way, leading to a cultural shift toward a world in which people are polarized, not by beliefs based on facts, but by misinformation, outrage, and fear. So I'll let you know when I read this book. So how does all this work? How are we manipulated? So a couple of things your book points out. Shared attention, knowing that you are engaging in social media in concert with a lot of others. It leads us to increases in the elaboration likelihood model, or deeper processing. So if we're watching something and we know a lot of other people are watching it, we're just going to engage with it more actively. And when we engage more actively, it has more power to influence. And then agenda control. Media giants control what we view using those algorithms we just talked about. And that means that they're showing us things that we will want to watch, which means that the beliefs we already had, well, now it's not even us engaging in confirmation bias, but the media companies themselves giving us more of what we already believe. And you can see that people are concerned about this. Like, people tend to think that social media companies, looking at the top graph, 62% think that social media companies in fact have too much control over what we see, and that their efforts to control what we see result in a worse mix of news for users. Some of this polarization that we've been seeing. So once again, the effects of the media, they control the agenda, as we've just mentioned, and they also control images. Like, media representations don't resemble reality. Males are portrayed 3 times more often than females, according to the data from your text. Underrepresented groups, children, older people, racial minorities, blue-collar, lower-income people, underrepresented, tending to show one type of person. And they still use stereotypes of groups of individuals, and that leads regular viewers to endorse the stereotypes. So a couple of ways the media is problematic for us. So the mechanisms of persuasion in social media. One small study that I read, cited at the bottom, is that most people really they know that social media isn't giving them as good objective information as traditional media, if that can still be found. But if we get information overload, if we get too much information and we don't have time to process it, then we become vulnerable. And that really is what the internet is all about. The little study that they did is they created conditions in which people were processing positive or negative information with like a time constraint or not a time constraint. And when they were rushed and had too much information to process, they were more likely to shift their opinion toward whatever was dominant. So if they were predominantly positive opinions, they tended to agree. It's almost like they skim all of the information they're getting because it's just too much to take in. So you will be seeing, as you look at websites in conjunction with the think part of our assignment this week, first, reciprocation. We are wired to reciprocate. We know that in real life, if someone gifts us, we return a gift. If someone invites us to dinner, we tend to invite them back. Same on social media. I don't tweet and do stuff like that, but if someone tends to like our posts on Facebook, we tend to like theirs, things like that. And so businesses take advantage of this. So if they can do something for you, they know that you will be more likely to reciprocate by giving business to them. And the second is commitment and consistency. We've already talked about, I believe we haven't yet talked about commitment. We will in our next content, but we tend to, once we take a stand, we stick with it. So getting someone to commit, they're likely to, even a small bit to commit, they're likely to stay with it. And so if we scribe to something, we don't tend to unsubscribe because we kind of made our decision, we made a commitment. And so what businesses do is they make it easy for us to commit, making it more likely that we'll stay. So, making it really easy to buy your item, or, we don't need much money, just $1, something like that. Third is social proof. We seek to act normatively, so we want to do what our peers are doing. So people online with many followers are listened to more. Products with many positive reviews are bought more. We rely on the information other people provide. So businesses tend to try to give us social proof, or evidence that others like us have also liked them. The fourth is authority. People look to those who know. We know that when experts or influencers speak, we listen. And businesses seek to demonstrate authority. So they try and make themselves look like experts with info videos, microsites, or other tools that may or may not actually contain expertise, but they look like they have authority. The fifth is liking. We prefer to say yes to people we know and like. So we like people who like us. We like people who are similar to us and who are familiar to us. We like people who are associated with good things. We like people who seem to share the same goals that we do. And so businesses take advantage of this. Maybe they'll pretend to share a goal. PetSmart, whenever you go there, will you donate toward pet abuse, making it seem like we're allied in our effort against pet abuse. Or giving us something to make us feel like we're favored or special so that we like them. Or becoming a common brand name so that it's just very, very familiar. Or say supporting a concert that's coming to town, or supporting the rodeo, so that, and here we are, the rodeo sponsored by the Sam's Club or whatever it is, so that we develop these good associations. So businesses take advantage of that. And finally, scarcity. We want what may become unavailable. And so think about things like this. This offer will expire in 15 minutes, and then they have a little timer ticking down. Better act now. Or only one left. Go on and try to go onto the website Expedia and pretend you're going to get a hotel room, and you will see that some of your top hits will say only one room left, just trying to create scarcity. And this information is based on a book from actually an ASU professor, I think Robert is his name, Robert Cialdini, and he wrote a book, Influence the Psychology of Persuasion, and this is an extrapolation from that book to social media. The hostile media effect. There's little videos on all of these things posted for you, but this is simultaneous tendencies. So we tend to have these two things. We first tend to believe that the media are hostile toward one's views, and also at the same time believe that our own views are reasonable, objective, and correct. And you'll recall from earlier in the chapter that this is called naive realism. And so the hostile media effect, again, perceptions in media, that media are biased against one's own side. And then perceptions of public opinion, also supporting that. And then the things that mediate this relationship, or the feelings that come to this relationship, are indignation. Well, how could they say that? The desire to correct wrongs, the feel that you have not, that our politics aren't as effective or competent, and a mistrust of media and mistrust of democracy. And so then you can see what happens in the actions column: enhanced political participation, like all the people who came out and voted; defiance of government, like the insurrection; social withdrawal and alienation, maybe some of those feelings that cause people to buy guns and do other dangerous things like that. And this expression on her face, this is how politics sometimes makes me feel if I'm not aware, and I think a lot of us are feeling that way. So cautions and conclusions from this content. Quoting an article in The Guardian, the social media people say to themselves, never get high on your own supply. Why social media bosses don't use social media. Social media leaders, like software engineers in Silicon Valley, put severe limits on their own and their children's use of social media, aware of the risks of spatial intrusion, loss of contact with real life, and damage to body and mind. Business marketers, the second maybe takeaway from this is that business marketers, like the creators of so many ads on the internet, take advantage of persuasion techniques and look for them, be aware of them, and figure out both when they're being used against you, maybe for negative ends, but also how they might be used for positive ends. And then be aware of those resistance techniques coming up in part 3 to limit their power over you. Now, there is a documentary that I watched a year or two ago when it was on Netflix, and happily now it's been made free because it's such an important documentary, and it's long, 1 hour and 34 minutes. So it's worth watching. We all live together in this world with all of these social media effects, and I think that for each of you in here in this social psychology class to know what's going on is going to benefit you and benefit our world. So you'll be watching this, and I'll ask you about it in the reflection questions.